Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to get started here in a little bit. We're going to probably get started in 2 or so minutes just to give people a chance to settle in. So feel free to ask any questions. We're going to be taking questions from the chat. There's also a Q&A function. So as we're going, we'll do questions at the end, but feel free to put questions in the chat or in the Q&A. And thanks for being here tonight. Before we get going, I want to thank everyone who's joined us from Duluth. We really wanted to be with you in person tonight, but we looked at the weather, and some of us coming from Ely in the cities, we just decided we want everyone to be safe at home with this storm coming. You know, we really need a lot of rain here in the Northland, but maybe not quite like this. So thanks for your patience and thanks for joining us via Zoom. We're glad folks can join. We'll get going here pretty quickly in about a minute or so. Hey everyone, thanks for being here. I do want to confirm that all participants are on video. Our videos are turned off and you are on mute. This is just to cut down on background noise. Thanks for understanding there. You can still ask questions and participate in the conversation by joining us in the chat and also with the Q&A function, which is down at the bottom of your screen. You can also access the chat function that way. But we're going to get going here. Thanks again for joining us and thanks for your patience as we pivoted to Zoom in light of the storm that's coming. My name is Sydney Jordan. I'm the organizing director for the Campaign to Save the Boundary Waters. And it's great to be here with all of you tonight. And I'm proud and honored to introduce our national campaign chair, Becky, who is going to give an update. But before I do that, I also want to acknowledge that our 2 regional organizers, Levi Luxvold, who is our Northern Regional Organizer, and Amanda Hefner, who is brand new to the campaign. She just started last week, who is our new Metro Organizer. So these are folks that you hear from all the time. They're the ones that talk to you about great event updates like the one we're doing tonight, and hopefully the rescheduled in-person event in Duluth. And so please feel free to say hi to them, ask them questions. They're wonderful people with a wealth of knowledge. But with that, I'm going to introduce Becky, our national campaign chair, who is going to give a campaign update on where the Campaign to Save the Boundary Waters is at the end of summer 2021. So go ahead and Becky, take it away. I know you have some slides to share and we will address all questions at the end of her presentation, but feel free to put them in as they come up, but we'll get to them all at the end. So thanks again for being here. And Becky, all yours.
Thank you, Sydney, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us on our Zoom update. As Sydney said, we had hoped to be there with you in person, but the weather has not cooperated and it's actually raining here right now in Ely. So I assume it's probably raining in Duluth as well. I'm going to talk to you about the Campaign to Save the Boundary Waters, which focuses on a 4.3 million acre ecosystem, the Quetico Superior ecosystem, which includes the Superior National Forest, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, Ontario's Quetico Park, and Minnesota's Voyager Park. So that is the ecosystem we work within that we seek to conserve, protect, and preserve. The campaign to save the boundary waters is led by Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness, which is a nonprofit in Minnesota, formed in Northeastern Minnesota in the mid-1990s. The headquarters is currently in Ely. So we founded and lead the campaign to save the boundary waters. NMW is now the largest conservation group in Minnesota that advocates for the preservation and protection of the Quetico Superior region. And we're leading the fight against copper mining to protect this great area. We have a very specific goal that we identified 9 years ago, and that goal is to get a permanent ban on sulfide ore copper mining in the watershed of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, which is also the watershed of the other places I mentioned earlier. We think that's a reasonable goal. And that is because the Quetico Superior ecosystem has been at the forefront of national protection areas since 1902. The Boundary Waters is a federally designated wilderness, but it's also Minnesota's only state wilderness. Mining was banned in the Boundary Waters first by the state in 1976 and then by the federal government in 1978. And both the state and the federal government have buffer areas around the Boundary Waters. The federal government has a 220,000 acre buffer area along the 3 entry corridors. What we know now is those buffers aren't big enough. We also have unique classifications under the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act to protect this place. And more recently, the Boundary Waters, Quetico, and Voyageurs National Park were declared international dark sky sanctuaries. So this is a special place viewed nationally as well in our state. Many view it as Minnesota's crown jewel. So to achieve this ambitious goal of a permanent protection against copper mining, the campaign has done a number of things. It's built a broad coalition of conservation groups, hunting and fishing groups, businesses, camps and schools, scientists, doctors, Kids for the Boundary Waters, veterans, and Indigenous people. Our campaign now includes over 350 businesses, and total membership is over 500 groups united around the goal of a permanent ban. We've worked hard over the last 9 years on building awareness across the United States of the threat of sulfide ore copper mining and why it was the wrong activity in this place. We've built a great team. We've built a team of talented and experienced staff who have expertise in science, law, policy, communications, politics, and have great organizing skills. And then we stay focused, always stay focused. We don't do anything unless it's something that, that moves our campaign towards success. So developing the science is both unique to sulfide ore copper mining, what that means, what that does in a water-based ecosystem, but it's also very dependent upon location. A location in the Superior National Forest, which has 20% of the fresh water in the entire national forest system of 193 million acres. And as a result of our focus on science, we have roughly about 60 or 65 high quality scientific papers, many of them now peer-reviewed and published. We know what the impacts, we can predict what the impacts would be on this ecosystem if sulfide ore copper mining were developed in the Boundary Waters watershed. And a lot of it, as I said, is place-based. So this is a photograph of the site of a proposed Twin Metals copper mine. So up here on the top of your screen is the Boundary Waters. There are two entry points here, one up the South Coishwee River, the other into Little Gabbro. This is the South Coishwee River that flows out of the Boundary Waters and meets Birch Lake here, and then turns and flows north back into the wilderness. A Twin Metals mine would be here, right here, right on the juncture of these two great water bodies and where the flowage goes directly north into the wilderness. If you were paddling down Birch Lake south, you'd come upon this scene. And if there was a twin metals mine here, you would be looking at the top of a very large processing facility. And then to the south or the right on this photograph, a waste dump called a tailings pile that would be 130 feet in height. So towering above all those beautiful white pines and red pines. And if you were an eagle or a loon, excuse me, and flew over the mine site, this is what you'd see. This is classic boreal forest, evergreen trees, wetlands, you see Birch Lake. It's a beautiful, healthy landscape. And what would happen if there was a mine in this location, and we know this because of our peer-reviewed and published hydrogeological work, the pollution from a twin metals mine would flow north. It would enter the boundary waters at Fall Lake, which is here. It would go up into Basswood Lake, which is the international border. Basswood is on the US and Canadian side, and then flow west along Crooked Lake into Lac La Croix, and then into Voyageurs National Park, either this way or through the Namakan River. And that's because of this proposed mine. This is from a twin metals submittal to both the state government and the federal government. This is what phase one of a twin metals mine would look like. The first deposit it would seek to exploit is this deposit here. This is the South Coishway River. This is Birch Lake. The very first photo I showed you had you here looking up the South Coishway River and at this intersection. The next photo would take you down here where the cliffs were. So this would be an underground mine. Here's Highway 1 stretching up towards the boundary waters. This would be the processing facility, which is not underground, it's on the surface. And this would be the tailings pile right next to Birch Lake. And this is the energy corridor, the transmission corridor that would follow Birch Lake. So what does it look like when you do an overlay of water? So you saw from the overhead, the aerial photo, how intensely wet this area is with wetlands and potholes and lakes. And so all the light blue represents surface water here on the mine and then throughout this site. The darker blue represents waterways, South Coishway River and Birch Lake. And this represents Keeley Creek, which is a navigable water, just a very lovely creek. This brings you in closer so you can see what the actual mine site would look like in terms of water overlay, which is at risk of contamination, flowing then into the wilderness. This is the dry stack tailings. This is where the waste would be. So here's Birch Lake, right here. Here's a processing facility. A large water intake pipe is just to the north of the processing facility where water would be appropriated directly out of Birch Lake. You need a lot of water to separate trace amounts of metals, copper, nickel, platinum, palladium from sulfide bearing ore. So it would come out of the lake. The ore would be processed, concentrates would be then shipped away. Antofagasta, that now owns Twin Metals, has all of its concentrates processed in smelters in China. So the concentrates would leave the US and go to China. And then the waste material, which is abundant, 99%, the very fine crushed waste material would be here in a dry stack tailing, a type of storage that the DNR has already deemed inappropriate for Minnesota. Notice how close it is to Birch Lake. There's no dam. Levi and I are sitting in Ely right now where we're about starting a thunderstorm. So it's very wet up here, as it was unfortunately Friday night. So this dry stack tailings facility is not likely to be dry for very long. And once it's wet, it sloughs off into the lake. This dry stack tailings facility, waste facility, will leach into the environment through all that water that you saw in the area, or by slouching into Birch Lake, or when in a dry state by airborne fugitive dust Pollutants such as lead, zinc, arsenic, mercury. It's high in sulfates, and the sulfite in the tailings, once exposed to air and water, forms sulfuric acid, and that whole brew of toxic heavy metals, sulfate, and sulfuric acid is what they call acid mine drainage. So this is a high risk area. It's an area that is not controlled by Twin Metals. It's state land, school trust land. And so the most dangerous and polluting part of the mine could be located on school trust land, which would make this parcel of school trust land a Superfund site for which all the taxpayers would have to pay for cleanup. And this is what it looks like when you put surface water overlays on the tailing site. As you can see, it's again a water-rich environment. And this takes you back to the beginning. This blue line here is the Laurentian Divide. All surface water north of that Laurentian Divide flows north into the Boundary Waters, into the Quetico, and downstream into Voyageurs National Park. This is the site of a Twin Metals mine that would then pollute the Boundary Waters. In addition to compiling the science, we've compiled the economics. And sulfide ore copper mining has been shown in the watershed of the Boundary Waters to do two things. It's shown to be very harmful to the existing economy. And second, it's shown to be a failed economic development strategy. Two PhD natural resource economists did a deep dive into what the economy of northeastern Minnesota really is. And it's not mining. It's an amenity-based economy that has a whole variety of components to it that ultimately really are there because it's a great place to live. People want to live up here. They want to go to school here. They want to practice their profession here. And now, as we know with Zoom, you have a lot more flexibility. So it's a very strong economy. The Key Log study showed that 5,000 local jobs would be lost if sulfide or copper mining were introduced in this site, and many more jobs would be lost throughout the arrowhead of Minnesota. The second economic study is an independent study done by Harvard economics professor James Stock. He did two things that nobody else had done. He looked over a 20-year horizon, and he looked at both the costs and the benefits of sulfide or copper mining in the watershed of the Boundary Waters. But he didn't take one set of assumptions. He looked at three different components of the economy. One would be a copper nickel mining economy. One is an outdoor recreation economy that we have here. And the other component was the amenity-based economy. That's everything else up here. And he put together 74 different scenarios of possible pluses and minuses in those three different segments of the economy. And he found that the regional economy did better, significantly better over 20 years in terms of both jobs and income if there was no sulfide or copper mining in the watershed of the Boundary Waters. And so the other thing that we've been working on with all of you is education and advocacy. We are a national campaign. We have supporters around the country, both ours directly and the 400 members of the coalition. And we've done scores and scores of lobby trips as citizen advocates. Thank you all very much. Our partner groups, scientists, business owners, Kids for the Boundary Waters, our staff to Washington, D.C. and St. Paul. We have had hundreds and hundreds of meetings. We've been sending groups of people to Washington every single month since December of 2013. That ended in March of 2020 because of the pandemic. We're hoping that we can start up again in September. And then we've had wonderful adventure advocacy campaigns. First and foremost, campaigns led by Dave and Amy Freeman, efforts to raise national awareness about the plight of the Boundary Waters. And then we've worked hard to get extensive media coverage around the United States. This was Dave and Amy's first adventure advocacy, really a lot of fun. Dave and Amy are here in the middle We have had the benefit of 4 canoes now donated by Winona. This canoe was paddled by Dave and Amy to Washington, D.C. from Ely. It took them 101 days. And this is part of the group that met them when they arrived and then went over here to the Capitol and lobbied for the Boundary Waters. Likewise, our Kids for the Boundary Waters, we have about 150 kids who've been trained to be citizen advocates. They also have been going to Washington, D.C. To advocate for permanent protection of the Boundary Waters. We had a trip set up in June of 2020. 100 kids had applied. We unfortunately had to cancel that, but we have another kids trip set for Washington in October. So go to kidsfortheboundarywaters.org, encourage kids you know who are younger than 23 to become a citizen advocate for the Boundary Waters and apply for that trip. We've also been keeping our tabs on the pulse of Minnesota. We've been polling with both Democrat and Republican pollsters since 2015. And what we find year after year is that Minnesotans opposed copper mining near the Boundary Waters. This is a poll from 2020, 62% opposed, a 39-point margin. We also found that Minnesotans support permanent protection, a permanent ban, by almost 70%. It's a powerful political issue, and we find by 2 to 1, Minnesotans vote for candidates who say they will protect the Boundary Waters. So what's our strategy? How are we going to get this permanent ban? When we set out early in the campaign, we had 3 different components. First was the rejection of the only 2 federal mineral leases in the Superior that had expired on January 1, 2014. There had never been any environmental look at those leases in the watershed of the Boundary Waters. They're the Twin Metals leases. We felt that if environmental considerations were taken into an analysis, the leases would be denied by the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. Our second plan was to get an administrative withdrawal of federal public lands and minerals in the watershed. That can happen by executive action for up to 20 years. And then finally, we wanted to get a permanent ban by an act of Congress. So how'd we do? We did very well. In 2016, Governor Dayton opposed a Twin Metals mine. The 2 federal mineral leases were allowed to expire after the Forest Service withheld its consent to renew the leases, and the process for a 20-year mineral withdrawal was started. That process is a 24-month science-based process. It provides for public input. You guys were fabulous. More than 181,000 people commented. More than 5,000 people attended public meetings. And 98.2% of the Americans who commented supported a 20-year ban. But then the tide shifted, tide turned. President Trump came into office in mid-January of 2017. And during the course of his administration, the 2 expired mineral leases formerly held by Twin Metals were unlawfully reinstated and renewed. The federal mineral withdrawal process was canceled after 20 months, and all of the studies which had been completed were withheld from the public and Congress. But we pushed back, and we worked with Congress on 20 oversight hearings that challenged these decisions. And we worked with US Representative Betty McCollum, who introduced a bill for permanent protection. We also initiated lawsuits starting in 2016. We've been part of 7 different lawsuits, and they have been our bridge to permanent protection. And the success we've had in these lawsuits move us closer to our goal. So where are we now? The Trump administration did everything it could to make a mine happen, but there's no Twin Metals mine today, which is good. We prepared for the possibility of a Trump administration by building a very comprehensive campaign to defend the politics of Boundary Waters protection And we were able during the course of those 4 years to slow down the federal leasing and review process, build additional political power and support, elevate the issue for the presidential candidates, both in Iowa and Minnesota. We released polling by both Republican and Democrat pollsters. We pushed back on anti-science and corruption activities that we discovered, and we engaged members of Congress to push back, such as by oversight hearings and Betty McCollum's bill. So where are we today? Now we have a Biden administration that is committed to science-based decision-making and the rule of law. Both Representative McCollum and Senator Smith have called on the Biden administration to reinitiate the administrative mineral withdrawal process that was canceled by the Trump administration. And finally, we have a Biden administration that has made addressing the climate and extinction crisis a priority. I'm going to talk to you about how that priority, the last priority, leads to what we hope will be permanent protection. So President Biden is committed to 30 by 30. He now calls it America the Beautiful. America, the United States, has a land base of protected areas, but they only make up 20% of the total US area. President Biden's goal is 30% of the US area and 30% of the oceans that are managed by the United States. So this is where we are, and this is where we have to go. And part of that protection can come from the boundary waters. So we know that nature has a role in helping all of us, all humanity, all life on Earth, in providing solutions for the climate and extinction crisis by helping us adapt, by providing landscapes that are resilient. So what I have up here are 3 different climate models that were done by the Nature Conservancy, but based on, well, actually it was done by the Wilderness Society, but based on the Nature Conservancy models. The Wilderness Society identified 74 different areas in the United States that had strong biodiversity values, were large interconnected landscapes, and were very healthy wild ecosystems. And they ran these landscapes through these 3 different climate models to see how they perform. This is a climate velocity centrality model that looks forward, how fast is change happening. You can see in the modeling, this red, those are the migratory patterns that we are expecting to see. The second model looked at it looking back, how far have we changed? And then the third model looked at the magnitude of species migration. Down at the bottom, you see the high performing landscapes through each of these 3 important climate modelings. And you see in each of these that the Quetico Superior region is one of the most important landscapes. And when you put it together, there are 6 of the highest value areas in the lower 48 that are important for provide in the solution for climate and extinction crises, that are important for adaptation and resilience. And of the 6, the Quetico Superior region is one of them. And so protecting unprotected Superior National Forest lands that would protect this landscape will contribute to the climate solution. And so that we can get there through the federal withdrawal process. And I'm going to take you quickly through that. So this is how the federal path to permanent protection works. So I've told you that Senator Tina Smith and Representative Betty McCollum have said, President Biden, please restart the mineral withdrawal process that the Forest Service started in 2016. And that starts with a 2-year study during which there's a ban on any mining decisions. And then a decision is made and you can get a 20-year administrative mining ban. And then you can go to Congress and get a permanent ban. And I'm going to take you through each of these steps so you understand the important strategy to permanently protect the boundary waters. So what are mineral withdrawals? They protect US public lands and waters from mining. So they don't work on private lands. They don't work with private minerals. It's a federal process for federal public lands and waters, lands and minerals, lands, waters, and minerals that you and I own. A mineral withdrawal is a ban. It bars the issuance of new federal leases and prospecting permits on withdrawn lands. The lands are withdrawn from the mining program. So two kinds of mineral withdrawals. One is an administrative withdrawal. That's what was started in 2016 by the Forest Service. That decision is made by the Interior Department for up to 20 years under a 1976 statute that sets out this process. But it was really a recodified statute from 1910. So for a very long time, it's been the policy of the United States that you don't mine everywhere. There are some places too valuable and too vulnerable, and those are places where you should have an administrative withdrawal of lands, waters, and minerals from the federal mineral leasing program. The permanent withdrawal is an act of Congress, and that's what Betty McCollum did in 2016. She did it again in 2020 and 2021. That would make a mining ban permanent. So who are the players in this drama? The Department of Interior is responsible for most of America's public lands, its national parks, national wildlife refuges, lands we call BLM lands, and it's also in charge of all minerals. The agency that is in the Department of the Interior is called the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, and it directly manages the federal mineral estate. It is led by a political appointee. The Department of Agriculture is responsible for our national forest system. So, and within the Department of Agriculture is the Forest Service. It manages 193 million acres of national forest lands. So it manages the Superior National Forest and the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, because the Boundary Waters is inside the Superior National Forest. In Minnesota alone, the only state in the United States, the Forest Service has to consent to mining on the Superior National Forest. No other state gives the Forest Service this special right. It's by statute. And that's because this place is so vulnerable when it comes to mining. So this is how the administrative process works. And this is what we are optimistic we will see from the Biden administration. An application will be filed by the Forest Service for a 20-year mineral withdrawal. In 2016, it was for 234,328 acres of land and minerals. This is all in the watershed of the Boundary Waters. That then triggers a 2-year segregation of all of this land and all of the minerals from the mining program. So no decisions can be made. And during that 2 years, the Forest Service analyzes a mineral withdrawal, the benefit of a ban, and the impacts of copper mining. There will be, by law, it's required, there will be a public comment period in public meetings once this process starts. We will keep you informed. It's very important that Americans engage. Last time we had 181,000 Americans engage. We'd like to beat that. And at the end of the analysis, the environmental assessment is sent over to the Secretary of the Interior, and Secretary Holland would make the decision. This is what the map looked like in 2016. This is the watershed of the Boundary Waters. It's the Laurentian Divide. The computer program that was used by the Forest Service only did right angles. We know the Laurentian Divide is not 90-degree angles, but this is the area up here by Voyageurs National Park and here in the headwaters of the Boundary Waters and Quetico. This was the land that was to be set aside for 20 years. So permanent withdrawal, that's an act of Congress. So Congress has the authority to permanently prohibit sulfide or copper mining on public lands and of public minerals in the watershed of the Boundary Waters. In 2020, Representative McCollum introduced her bill to make the 234,328 acre lands and minerals permanently banned from mining. She did very well in 2020. We're now in a new Congress, and she reintroduced her bill on Earth Day 2021, and our goal is to pass that bill. Again, she's tied it to the mineral withdrawal map. So her bill protects all of the blue and the yellow, actually protects everything, but it withdraws all of the blue and the yellow from the federal mineral leasing program. We've also deployed state strategies, particularly important through the Trump years. We've been advocating for Governor Walz to reject a Twin Metals mine plan, in large part because the waste tailings pile is state land and would expose the state to risk and liability. We've also worked on a state bill that is the state counterpart of Betty McCollum's bill. It would ban mining on state lands in the watershed of the Boundary Waters. And then last, we brought a very groundbreaking lawsuit challenging Minnesota's non-ferrous mining rules because we do not believe they are protective of the Boundary Waters by allowing copper mining in the watershed. So where are we? We have victory in 2 of our lawsuits, and these will generate public comment periods coming to you soon. We anticipate this fall. First, we challenged the extension of 13 prospecting permits around the Twin Metals mine site. They cover 15,000 acres. The Minnesota Attorney General and the DNR agreed that we had made a prima facie case that Minnesota's mining rules failed to protect the Boundary Waters. And we're going to go into a public process to reconsider those rules. And then we're going into a process to reconsider those 13 federal prospecting permits with also a public comment period. So let me just show you what that looks like. So 13 federal prospecting permits are shown in orange. So they were extended in May of 2020 by the BLM without any environmental review and without any consultation with Fish and Wildlife Service over impact on endangered species. You see that these permits come right up to the Boundary Waters, right by Gabbro, over here, right by Bald Eagle, 2 really spectacular places in the Boundary Waters. This is a Boundary Waters entry point. This is a Boundary Waters entry point. And so these prospecting permits extend down here. The federal government has agreed to have an environmental review process, an environmental assessment on these prospecting permits. That environmental assessment will include an opportunity for you, the public, to comment, to write letters, to engage. The federal government has the authority to then withdraw all of these prospecting permits. So it's very important that the federal government hear from you. And that would be a process run by the BLM. Just so you know, this is one of the Twin Metals leases up here. We're still fighting that. This green is the other Twin Metals prospecting, mineral lease. We're fighting that. The yellow here is an application for a new federal mineral lease. So existing lease, existing lease, application, prospecting permits. Here is the South Quishwe River going, meeting Birch Lake and going north and entering into the Boundary Waters. On the state lawsuit, we've challenged the non-ferrous mining regulations in the Rainy River headwaters, which is this here. It is not the entirety of the Rainy River drainage basin, but it does cover our mine site. And you see here, all the waters flow north from this mine site. So we have advocated for the change of the rules here to ban mining in this entire white area. The agreement that we entered into with the DNR and Minnesota's Attorney General would remand the rules and our lawsuit to the DNR to consider all of the science we have developed and to allow for public input on whether its rules should be changed here in the White area. So we have been anticipating that this would also start this fall. We've had a little bit of a holdup because Twin Metals has intervened in our lawsuit and is trying to appeal this process. We're optimistic that they won't get very far and that this fall you'll be asked to give a comment on whether these rules should ban copper mining in this White area. So I'm now going to turn it over to our outreach team. We've talked about 3 different comment period possibilities. The federal prospecting permit comment period, that'll be run by the federal government. We anticipate that will be this fall. The state comment period on the non-ferrous mining rules, we anticipate that will be this fall as well. And we're optimistic that we'll get a federal mineral withdrawal application filed. And if that happens, there will be a comment period on a 20-year administrative mineral withdrawal for the entire watershed of the Boundary Waters. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sydney, who heads our outreach team, to introduce our team and talk about ways you can help.
Thanks, Becky. And people are starting to put questions into the chat. We're going to get to that really quickly here. But before we do, I do want to emphasize that the only way we can achieve these victories and permanently protect the boundary waters is with your help. We need everyone to be talking about these comment periods, sharing this with their friends, and we will be making this presentation. We're recording it and we will share it with you when it's over to help you with your comment periods. We also have a document that we will share with you that will help synthesize it and get your creative juices flowing with how to make a comment. But like Becky said, I'm the organizing director for the campaign to save the boundary waters. So I make sure our regional organizers have the tools they need to ensure that you have the tools you need to get involved to save the boundary waters. These are our email addresses. Levi works specifically with our northern half of the state in northern Minnesota. Amanda works in the metro area specifically. We also, not here tonight, have another organizer named Roberto who works with volunteers across the country. So he's talking to volunteers like literally from New Jersey to Arizona about the boundary waters and making those steps to permanently protect it, because we know the boundary waters belongs to all of us. Belongs to everyone in Minnesota, but it belongs to everyone in America too. So we are making sure that we're not leaving any stone unturned with making sure the public has an opportunity to weigh in. So we need lots of help. Like I said, we need the comment periods, but we're also trying to do more and more of these updates. We are really excited to start doing in-person updates, even tonight notwithstanding. So again, special thank you to everyone who's joining us from Duluth. We're planning on rescheduling soon to make sure that we're there in person. We love Duluth and can't wait to see you. We do have a lot of other participation you can do while we wait for these comment periods. Obviously, signing our petition at savetheboundarywaters.org. That tells your federal decision makers, so your US senators and your congressperson, that you care about permanently protecting the boundary waters from sulfide or copper mining. Writing them a personal note is always even more impactful than signing our petition. Saying more about why you specifically care about this, because you went on a Boy Scout trip, because you care about endangered species, because you're concerned about mercury and fish. That means a lot to your members of Congress when they get a specific letter from you. You can also use that. You can also use that to write a letter to the editor of your local paper. A lot of local papers are really looking for content, and they often will print them. Your voice matters, and and those publications will print your voice. Like we've already talked quite a bit about our upcoming comment periods. We also need help even meeting with elected officials. Sending them an email or leaving them a voicemail is great, but even meeting with them is incredibly impactful. They're going to remember you. They care. It's their job to serve you, and they care about what you think. So meeting with them is always great. We'll help you with that. Amanda or Levi will be there to answer the tough questions that Senator so-and-so might ask, and so, or their staff. So you just need to be there to say, I'm a constituent and I care about this issue. And then lastly, helping us spread the word through your social media platforms. If you're on Twitter, or if you're on Facebook, sending something to your family group chat about, hey, I went and heard this presentation from Becky tonight. Remember when we had that great fishing trip with Dad back in the day where we caught all those walleye on Gabbro? You know, that's at risk right now. So making sure that you're letting everyone in your network know is really important, especially family members that maybe don't live in Minnesota. It's important for our federal, a lot of Minnesotans are making these asks, but we're not always hearing the same things from our elected officials across the country, and they need to hear from that too. So thank you for all of your work. Amanda and Levi are always here to help you. That's their job. It's my job too. And we love doing it. So please always feel free to reach out to any of us. With that, I think we're going to get into questions. I've been keeping a list. Nancy asked a question about the mine plan. Levi, can you tell us a little bit more about what an energy corridor is and what it means with this mine plan?
Yeah, sure. Here, just give me 1 second. Oh, here it is. See if I can pull up the map. Oh, Becky, you're going back to the slide for me?
Yeah.
That'd be great. Okay. So the energy corridor, this works. Here we go. So it's a corridor that is about 10 miles long. It goes from the mine site just below the tailings basin and then snakes its way to the southwest towards the city of Babbitt, where they would have their offsite electrical substation. So that would be a 10-mile long corridor that would be clear cut to be about 150 feet long. But as of yet, we don't quite know where they're planning to get that electricity from to run their underground mine.
Thanks, Levi. Mark had a question for Becky. He would like to know more about the Forest Service's timeline and timing around the 20-year mineral withdrawal. Would you be able to talk a little bit more about what that means and what the timing is with that?
Yeah, so hold on, let me get to the, okay. We don't yet have a reinitiation of a federal mineral withdrawal process. We're optimistic that the Biden administration and the Forest Service will file a new application. We're all anxious to see that, but it takes time for the new leadership in the departments and agencies to be confirmed by the Senate. But when the application is filed, the Interior Department will automatically remove all of those lands and minerals that are in the application from the federal mineral leasing program. The Forest Service has up to 2 years to do its environmental assessment. But remember that it worked for 20 months in 2017 and 18 on an environmental assessment. We know the underlying studies were done. We know there was a 60-page draft environmental assessment that was completed before the study was canceled by Agriculture Secretary Perdue. So we're optimistic that once the application gets filed, the Forest Service can move much more quickly and won't need 24 months. In fact, it only had 4 months left to go. So it's possible that the study could be done in 6 or 9 months, thereabouts. And then once completed, the study would go over to the Secretary of the Interior with a recommendation. So I can't tell you when it would start. I can't tell you absolutely for sure that it's going to start. I can tell you we're optimistic that it will start soon, and that it can be completed expeditiously to protect the watershed.
Thanks, Becky. Lucy has some questions about the differences between polymet and twin metals. Becky, would you be able to say more about the differences and concerns with those two projects?
Sure. Well, both are bad sulfide ore copper minings proposed for northeastern Minnesota. The Twin Metals mine is north of the Laurentian Divide, and it's a mine on federal land and of federal minerals. And so that then dictated the strategy that we're using to protect twin metals. We can hopefully achieve an administrative mineral withdrawal and achieve a permanent ban by Congress, because the mining would be of public lands and minerals. Polymet is located south of the Laurentian Divide in the watershed of Lake Superior, and is now on private land and has private minerals. And so the strategy for challenging that mine is different. We are leading the campaign north of the divide through our national coalition. South of the divide, really the intellectual horsepower in challenging Polymet has come from Water Legacy and MCEA, Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, and from the tribes. And their strategy had been to work through the environmental review process and then litigate and challenge permits that flowed from that environmental review process. And they're having good success in challenging the permits. So although they are both copper nickel mines and they're not physically actually that far apart, they impact different watersheds. And because of the characteristics, private versus public, the solutions are different. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, Becky. We have another question. Paul and Lori both want to know, what about Canada? How do Canadians and their government feel about the potential for pollution in their watershed?
They're not.
Becky, maybe you and I could talk about that. We actually have been to Canada to talk to Canadians, and they're not too pleased, is how what I've heard loud and clear from Canadians who live in this watershed. But what is the Canadian government doing? And I know Representative McCollum has worked a little bit with the Canadian government, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So Canada is not pleased and has been engaged in this issue for quite a number of years. Among other things, the government of Canada submitted a formal comment letter when the Trump administration renewed the two twin metals leases, expressing grave concerns about transboundary pollution and cumulative impacts. There is a treaty between the United States and Canada that governs the entire border from east to west of the United States and the border between Canada and Alaska, called the Boundary Waters Treaty. It's a 1909 treaty. And that treaty prohibits the US from polluting the waters of Canada and vice versa. So Canada has been working through the International Joint Commission, which is the international body made up of Americans and Canadians that is overseeing the treaty. And they've been engaged with the Watershed Board, the Rainy River Drainage Watershed Board. It's called the International Rainy Lake of the Woods Watershed Board, challenging this mine since about 2015. So they're continuing to express their concerns. The concern and the concern also involves the Indigenous people, the First Nation of Canada. When Sydney and I were in Canada, we met with a number of folks from the Treaty 3 area. And in fact, the Lac La Croix village, which is a First Nation community, sent a letter in 2016 to the Obama administration asking for a mineral withdrawal. So they've been very engaged. The Minnesota Chippewa tribe also supports permanent protection of public lands and minerals in the watershed and supports Betty McCollum's bill. So anyway, Canada's engaged. It's been a good partner. Representative McCollum has also worked with the Canadian government to try to get their voice recognized now again in the Biden administration.
Thanks, Becky, and thanks for the question. We have a special relationship with Canada, and they're very concerned about this. Another group that's concerned is folks who love Voyageurs National Park. We work pretty closely with the Voyageurs National Park Conservancy, but Jeffrey would like to know a little bit more about how we're working with advocates there and how they can be involved with protecting this watershed since they're impacted as well. So I don't know, Becky, if you want to take that one too.
Sure. So there is hydrogeological science that shows that sulfide or copper mining in the headwaters of the boundary waters would negatively impact voyagers. So, you know, we are all together in having a stake in this. And so we work with Voyager Conservancy. We work with the Oberholzer Foundation and others. They're all part of our coalition. You know, we share our science, we share our advocacy, we work together, we coordinate. If you're in the Voyagers Park region, you can get engaged in all the ways that Sydney talked about at the end. Sign our petition at savetheboundarywaters.org. Then you'll get on our email list and you'll know when these comment periods are happening. We have ambassador clubs where if you want to, you can participate by being even more engaged. Sydney can talk to you about that. But please, by all means, we have a national park and a national wilderness area and a national forest at risk here. And we all have to, you know, work together to permanently protect these areas.
Great. So it looks like we have one more question from Kathy, and she's wondering, how can Minnesota state legislators have an impact on these decisions and what their role is in this whole process?
Sure. There's a long history of the state of Minnesota and the federal government working together to protect the boundary waters, starting way back in 1902. And oftentimes it's involved the Minnesota legislature. So for example, in 1976, the Minnesota legislature passed a law that banned mining on state lands inside the boundary waters. The federal government followed 2 years later. So it took Minnesota's lead. And then in 1978, banned mining in the watershed inside the boundary waters. So Minnesota legislatures have before them a bill that was introduced both in the House and the Senate in 2021 that would ban mining on state lands in the watershed of the boundary waters. Support for that, a hearing, that would all be very helpful. But they can also communicate to the Biden administration their support for federal action. And so again, Minnesota and the federal government would be working hand in hand in protecting this place. And then finally, we have our upcoming comment period on Minnesota's non-ferrous mining rules and whether they're sufficiently protected of the boundary waters. Legislators are citizens. They can submit comment letters on the failure of Minnesota's rules to effectively protect the boundary waters and encourage the DNR to enter into rulemaking to change those rules. We, by the way, have been, we take legislators and members of Congress to the mine site, take them down Birch Lake, South Coishwee River. We take federal leadership there, as well as state executive branch leadership. And so encouraging them to come up here, meet with our business owners, our local people, our community members, go visit the mine site. I think they'd realize how critically important this is, not only for their constituents and people around the rest of Minnesota, but also up here.
Thanks, Becky. I'm glad that Lucy has enjoyed our presentation. We've had some questions from Patricia about, do we give this presentation elsewhere? And the answer is yes, we do. We love giving these presentations in other cities. One that was on it was Rochester. We have a ton of support in Rochester and have done these talks in Rochester and would love to do one in the future. We're going to be doing more and more of them. And we can definitely put Rochester on that list. But that's also another area where you can help out. If you have ideas for areas where we really need to be and more people need to hear this presentation, please reach out to Levi, Amanda, and myself. The other way that you can be really helpful is we also love doing this with groups. So if you're a member of a local birding group or or your church or synagogue or temple wants to hear more about this issue, or if your Girl Scout or Boy Scout troop has a big jamboree and you have a group of people who care about wild spaces and care about the boundary waters, please let us know. We'd be happy to do a presentation for you and the people that you're in contact with. That's exactly what we do. That's our jobs. So Patricia, thanks for the question. And yes, Paul, we will be sharing this presentation with, we can share this presentation with you as well. I think we have one more question, Levi, and if anyone else has a question, feel free to put it in. Otherwise, we will end with this question. Levi, Richard asked a little bit more about which areas are protected with Representative McCollum's bill. Can you talk a little bit about that and which areas exactly are included and defined in this bill?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of a funny map to look at with the right angles, but that's okay. So I think this question had more to do with the watershed of the Rainy Rivers and the Vermilion River. And so to answer that question, yes. So this is mainly looking at the headwaters for the Rainy River and the Vermilion River as they flow north. So we've got the headwaters of the Rainy River watershed to the south, where you see most of this blue of the 234,000 acres that would be withdrawn. And then on the western side, you can see a little bit more blue, and that would be in the area of the Vermilion River. And I can send out a more in-depth watershed map that kind of breaks that down into all the subunits, so you can check that out. And again, the way I look at this is our work is really just kind of expanding in this light green area you see on your map. It's extending that mining protection area to include all of the watershed to permanently protect the wilderness and Voyageurs National Park. I do have another thing I'd like to put in the chat though real quick, Sydney. So this is the main fact sheet I wanted to give out tonight. So this is our upcoming processes document. So on the front page, you've got the three main things we're anticipating to happen. So you've got the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act lawsuit. You've got the upcoming prospecting permit EIS, and then hopefully a mineral withdrawal comment period. And so on the front, it goes into detail on those three processes. And then on the back, it's a toolkit to help you write your own comment. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm also working on a more in-depth document for those who really want to dig into the mine plan and the impacts that Twin Metals would have on this landscape.
And that document's meant to be shared. So that's an example of something you can share when people are saying, save the boundary waters from what? And how can we be involved? So please share this as you can. And again, these are our email addresses. Please share them, please use them. We can send this recording and these documents to everyone who participated in this webinar tonight. Thanks again for being here. I think Levi has one more thing to say, and then Becky, I don't know if you have any final comments, but we'll go to Levi and then Becky to close us out.
Yeah, so for everyone that's here, I mean, we'll have a participant list that I can use to send out an email. So I'll send you all the handouts we meant to bring to Duluth tonight, so you have those, and then you also then have a digital version that you can share with your friends and family and networks to help us spread the word and build this movement.
Thanks. I don't know, Becky, do you have any final thoughts or things you'd like folks to know?
Well, thanks everybody for participating. We're at a very crucial moment in time to protect the boundary waters, but we're optimistic. Our whole team is optimistic. We're very, we're here to help everybody who wants to join in and be part of this movement. So thank you. Please reach out to Sydney, Levi, and Amanda, and we'll get this thing done. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I think I think I would also be remiss if I didn't also say another way you can support the campaign is to donate. It does go a long way, but we're the outreach team, which is why I think we forget to sometimes mention that. So please help us in any way you can and whatever is appropriate for you. We truly appreciate you. And we love doing this job so we can help you protect this wilderness that we all love so much and is so critical to our state and our planet. So thanks again for being here tonight, and be well, be safe if you're in the Northlands. That's a pretty wicked storm that's headed your way. If you're gonna be in the Ely area this weekend, we have our annual garden party, which is a big fundraiser, and we will be having, again, more events near you. So thanks again, stay safe, stay cool if you're down in the metro where I am, and have a great night. Thanks, everyone.